Welcome to Awake to Oneness Radio. My name is Caroline Chang, host and producer of Awake to Oneness Radio. And my guest today is Julie Cluff. And I am so glad to connect with Julie because she and we have a lot in common. And I just had to have her on my show. But I'm going to let her introduce herself to the audience and let her tell you all about herself. Okay, Julie, welcome to Awake to Oneness Radio.
Thank you so much. I am so thrilled to be here and like you said, we do have a lot in common.
Yes.
We were kind of laughing before we got started about, some little synchronicities and some little nuances to our personalities and the way we do things. But yeah, I'm Julie Cluff. I'm a spiritual medium and an intuitive, and so that means that I help people get connected with their loved ones on the other side. And I offer like spirit guidance sessions and that kind of thing as an intuitive. And yeah, it's a remarkable journey how I got here and
Yeah.
why I'm doing this work because I never suspected that this would be the work that I would be doing. So,
Right.
yeah, it's quite interesting.
So please share with our listeners how you got started with doing this work.
Well, it all kind of begins with the fact that I had experienced so much loss in my life. I there's been a lot of loss, but kind of the three big things that happened in my life was my youngest brother passed away by suicide more than 30 years ago now, and then my first marriage ended just like within a couple of years after my brother's passing. And then I remarried and I had three kids from my first marriage and three and then my second husband, who I'm still married to 30 plus years later. We had three children and we were raising them all together. And I was in
That
I was
reminds me of
taking
the Brady Bunch.
I
The
was going
three,
to
the
say
three of
that and
the
I was
top
like,
three. No, and I loved watching the Brady Bunch growing up. But three and three, six kids,
yeah.
that reminds me of the Brady Bunch. But go ahead. Didn't
I
mean to
know, and
interrupt.
I will often say that, like we were
Okay,
just, this Brady Bunch family, but
right.
yeah, my husband hadn't had any children before we
Hmm.
got married, and he was, he became, like he said, he became a husband and a father on the
All
same
at
day.
once. Hmm.
And
Yeah,
so, yeah, we were raising all the kids together, and it was a big, beautiful, like you said, a big, beautiful Brady Bunch family.
yeah.
And then in 2007, on Mother's Day, I was taking my three youngest children. The three older ones had, they were older, they had other things they were doing. And so I had my three youngest with me, and we were traveling to visit grandparents. And we were living in Texas at the time, and we took off east to go visit my in-laws. And we like midway through the afternoon, I fell asleep at the wheel of the car. And I was driving an SUV, and I had my son James 12, who was in the seat next to me, and my daughter Carrie was 10. She was in the back seat. My son David was 8, and he was in the back seat with his sister. So it's our three youngest children, and when I fell asleep at the wheel, when I woke up, and what's really strange about this is that I never felt tired that day. And to wake up and realize what was going on, and I was bouncing in between the westbound and eastbound lanes of highway, and of course immediately tried to pull the SUV back up on the highway, and when I did that, the wheels lifted off the ground and we started rolling, and we rolled across two lanes of highway into the onto the other side of the highway into the shoulder.
Oh my God.
Um, and in that process, I I was knocked out at some point during that process, but was my consciousness was coming back. My eyesight was a little delayed, and Um, I couldn't see anything at first, but I could hear my son next to me. So I knew he was okay. Like, I mean, I knew he was there.
To hear him, so you know, yeah.
Right, exactly. But when I started calling for Carrie and David, there was no answer. And when my eyesight returned and I started to see all the destruction, and it was this most shocking experience. There's no real words for it. I can still feel what that felt like to just be in that car and feel all that, and that sense of like panic and shock and knowing, like there's just this knowing that my life had changed forever. And I didn't know what the circumstances were going to be, but I just knew that my life had changed forever. And I wanted to figure out, like literally I was sitting in the car trying to figure out how can I reverse time? How
Mm-hmm.
can I go back 5 minutes? I mean, it was it was just so incredibly shocking. But as my eyesight returned and I started to, again calling for Carrie and David, no answer, and then I realized that they had been thrown from the car, and they were um and I, look out over here because I could see them out on the left, but what it felt like I was a football field away from them. Like it felt like they were forever away from the car. I just didn't even know. It was just hard to put the pieces together and try to understand what was going on. I was mentally, emotionally, and physically in shock.
Of course, of
And
course.
um, yeah, and I just knew that. And the other thing that was fascinating, looking back on this, like I also had a very clear knowing that they were either both here or they were both gone. I just knew that one did not stay without the other, or one did not pass without the other.
Right.
And I did find out, later after we had gone to the hospital that they had passed away. And the other remarkable thing that happened in the process of this accident was as we started to roll, I heard this very calm voice in my head that said, "Bring your arm in." And it wasn't long after after the accident, that a family member called me and told me about this woman that he had just seen on TV who had lost her arm in a rollover accident similar to mine. And it was a couple years after that, I met a woman who had lost her arm in a rollover accident like the one that I was in. But I had a very distinct voice in my head, guidance that said to bring my arm in, and somehow I did, and saved my arm. My wrist was I had a slight fracture to my wrist, but and some other pretty severe sprains to my shoulders. But other than that, I was I physically I was amazing to walk away from an accident like that. I was in the hospital for a couple
Of
of days.
course.
They did keep take me in the hospital and ran tests and all kinds of things, but our 12-year-old son, he his leg was injured,
Mm-hmm.
and interestingly, at the hospital, I can remember hearing the nurses, the attendants, and talking about talking about this surgeon that was there at the hospital.
Right.
It was Mother's Day.
Yes.
This happened on Mother's Day.
Mother's Day. Yes.
And the people in the hospital were saying, "What is this? Why is the doctor here? Because he's never." First of all, they were astonished he was there because it was a Sunday, but also it was a holiday.
Right.
And but it turns out he was the one that did the surgery on on our son's leg, saved his leg, did a remarkable intervention, medical intervention for him, and it turns out he was the surgeon who had pioneered, who had developed the procedure that our son needed.
Mm.
The
Wow.
hospital was named after his family. Like I have full body chills just even talking about it
Yeah.
because it was so remarkable.
Yeah.
So this was what was so confusing to me in the months that followed was that there were so many miracles
Mm-hmm.
that attended us that day. The miracle of having this surgeon there to
Mm-hmm.
operate on our son. He's now in his 30s. He was
Mm-hmm.
12 at the time, but he's now in his 30s and he's healthy. You know, his leg is
Mm-hmm.
healthy. He's able uh, to participate in physical
Right.
activity. There's no long-term issues.
Right.
And it's just remarkable. And then, my arm was saved and what was so confusing about this was that why did that voice come early and say, "Hey, Julie, you're sleepy.
Wake up. Yeah.
Pull
Hey, Julie, wake
over."
up. That would have
Yeah.
been to get that message. Hey, Julie, wake up. You're driving. That would have been a little bit better than pulling your arm. But
Yeah.
all things happen. And we both had similar, well, it wasn't a car accident with me, but we both know we both have two children in spirit. And
Yeah.
I know as a mom, I know, and I only had two. I know as
Mhm.
a mom that they left in perfect divine timing for them. And
Isn't it the truth? And that's
so
so hard to hear.
I know.
And if somebody had said that to me,
Then, yeah.
then I would
Right.
have been like, yeah, I mean, there was a part of me that could have like entertained that just the tiniest bit, but
Hmm.
now it's like this full, you know, like understanding,
Full
the
on knowing.
understanding,
Yeah.
and what's really what's also pretty fascinating is these same two kids, Carrie and
Hmm.
David,
Hmm.
5 years before when they were
Hmm.
3 and 8, or sorry, 3 and 5,
Hmm.
they were in this freak accident at our house. We had just moved into a house
Hmm.
and our dog was in the backyard and they had gone upstairs and it was spring and they opened the window and they were leaning on the screen talking to the dog in the backyard and fell through the second story window
Wow.
onto the hard pool deck.
Wow. Not even on the grass.
Yeah,
Yeah. Wow.
with minor
Mm.
injuries.
Mm.
When I look back on that now, and I've even had family members say, if it hadn't been for that freak accident 5 years before, I don't know that I would have understood
Hmm.
that this was part of their plan,
This was
and
their plan, and
yeah,
their plan. They had a plan to leave together. They did. That
yeah.
was their sole plan.
And that knowing, like right
Hmm.
then, that either both of them are here or both of them are gone. Like I just
Hmm.
knew. And again, I just have full body chills again, just
Yeah.
sharing that because
Yes.
it was part of their design. And even after they passed and we were looking through pictures and gathering pictures, there were so many pictures of them hugging each other.
Mm.
It's like every
Yeah.
time we took a picture of them, they just wrapped their arms around each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was really their relationship. Their
Yeah.
relationship was so close
Right.
and it just makes a lot of sense.
I
It
can
makes a
tell
lot of
they
sense.
probably have many lives together, the two
Yeah.
of them, you know. Wow.
Yeah.
Now, when I didn't know, all I knew is that you had lost two children through a car accident. Um, when you just described what happened, and it happened on Mother's Day, and you
Yeah.
felt you dozing off at the wheel, which that happens to many of us, you know. And yes, but it reminds me of Jeff Olson, and I don't know
Mm.
if you're familiar with Jeff
I
Olson.
know Jeff, yes.
I know Jeff
Uh,
very well. I know
yeah.
Jeff very well, but it's a very similar situation
Mm-hmm.
where he maybe dozed off for a second, and it was a holiday. It was a Sunday. I think it was Easter holiday. I want to say
I think
Easter
it was. I think they
holiday.
were coming back from
They were
visiting
coming
his
back in-laws.
in-laws.
Yep, they had just
Yeah.
left. As a matter of fact, his wife, who didn't survive the accident, she stopped him and turned around to give her parents an extra
Yeah.
hug.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Come on," he's like, "You hugged them already." But so her soul knew. So
Yeah.
her soul knew that was going to be the last time she got to hug her parents, and
Yeah.
she turned around and gave them an extra hug.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, and he has wonderful encounters with his wife and the baby that
Mm-hmm.
transitioned in that accident. And he has one son that survived. He lost his leg, but
Yep.
I see him every year at the IONS conference.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Uh-huh.
I've been a
He
speaker.
was just
Yes.
speaking at both of us,
Hmm.
Jeff and I were both at the Living God's Light conference
Okay.
in
Okay.
May, and we both spoke at that conference.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned Jeff because I
Hmm.
remember a few years ago when I very first began, like this was the very beginning of my journey of sharing my experience.
Right.
And this was probably 8 years ago, 9 years ago now. And and somebody said, well, do you know who Jeff Olson is?
I mean, when you share your journey, it's like the first thing. If anyone that knows Jeff and his story and his
Yeah,
journey,
yeah,
first thing when you say it is like, oh, that's another Jeff story.
yeah,
Very
yeah.
similar. Very similar.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Jeff's been on my podcast and
Hmm.
yeah, he's just
Yes.
a remarkable human being.
Yes.
And yeah,
Yes.
he's done some
Yes.
remarkable work since
Yes.
then. But
Yes.
yeah, you talked about the soul knowing.
Yes.
And I don't know I don't know what your experience was, but
Hmm.
I had some really unusual experiences before my children died, like in that month or two before they passed.
Okay.
And at the time, they didn't make a lot of sense to me. I'm like, I'm not sure why I'm feeling this way. I'm not sure why this happened. I'm not sure why that happened. But it was only afterwards
Right.
that I look back and I go, oh, that was my soul preparing me without my
Not just
consciousness being
your
aware
mind,
of what was
without
happening.
exactly without your mind, your what I call the monkey mind or the human mind getting in the way.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. For example, at one point, there was a woman who I didn't know super well.
Hmm.
Um, but I knew her, in-laws and she was a young woman and she passed away about a month before my kids passed away. And I actually had been invited, so this was somebody I knew from my church congregation.
Hmm.
And they had asked me if I would, as I play the piano, so they'd asked me if I would
Teach,
accompany.
I teach, I play, but I really, I stopped playing years ago, but I've been teaching piano to children for over 32
I
years.
taught piano lessons as
Oh
well.
God, no.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just this is too much. Too much.
Piano, I mean, music has been so valuable to me, but I
Yes,
actually had been invited, they'd asked me if I would be willing to play for her service.
right.
And I was feeling really off. And I just said, I don't, and which was really unusual for me because
Hmm.
typically when they would ask me, I would say yes.
Yes.
It
Mhm.
wouldn't be a big deal. But
Right.
at that time, I was just like, I just don't know that I can do it. And
Wow.
so I passed that up, and I said no, like I said, which was really unusual. And then I went to the service, and when I walked in, I I had this like spirit experience when I walked into the service
Okay.
and I saw her husband and and I just like had all this like this download kind of come in
Right.
about how much God loves him, how much God loves his family. I mean, like I said, it was a really unusual experience, especially for someone I didn't know very well.
Right.
And at the time, I honestly what I thought was there was because it was during the time period, it was around the time period of the anniversary of my brother's passing.
Passing. Okay.
And so I thought, well, maybe this is what I'm feeling is just kind of like this grief around my brother's passing. But when I would tune into it, I was like, that's not what it is. Like it just, I just wasn't sure. And then I walked in and I had this like really unusual experience when I walked in, and I just felt I felt source, God, universe, whatever, whatever your terminology is. I felt that love for her husband. I felt that love for her family,
Mm-hmm.
and it was remarkable. And it didn't make any sense to me at the time. And there were other things that happened, and you talked about Jeff's experience where they
Right.
turned around and she went back and
Right.
gave her parents another hug. The night before our trip, my husband had kept the kids up
Mm-hmm.
watching a movie.
Okay.
And it was a very heartwarming movie.
Mm-hmm.
And he was sitting on the couch and he had one on one side and one on the other.
Right.
And frankly, I was irritated
Okay. Okay.
because I was like, we've got a trip and we're leaving early in the morning. You're keeping the kids up. They're going to be grumpy. I'm going to have to deal with it.
Right. 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 Right.
But that was just a beautiful experience for them to have that time together
Yes.
in that very close experience
Yes.
before their passing. And there's memories that stick with you, and one of the memories that stick with me was all of us in the driveway as my husband was saying goodbye to all of us, and
Okay.
some of the things he said. Like, I mean, if you asked me about any other times when I'd gone on a trip, I wouldn't be able to remember it. But for
Right.
whatever reason, that, holds a important space. I-
Yes.
I- And
The
I went through just horrific PTSD.
mm-hmm.
I was going through counseling for, my PTSD, and for that I could barely drive my car. Like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I could drive short distances, and even
Right.
then it was harrowing. And I was just in a bad space. It was really horrific, and complicated grief and all the things and all the shame and all the self-hatred that I
Mm-hmm.
had for myself because I was the cause
Mm-hmm.
of all
Mm-hmm.
this. I was the cause of their passing. I was the cause of my family's pain. It just was heaping all of that on myself, and that was
Right.
extremely challenging to say the least.
Mm-hmm.
But like 5 months later, I walked into a drugstore and they were putting out Halloween costumes, and I saw this costume and I thought, oh, Carrie would love that. That
Mm-hmm.
was my first thought.
Right.
And then quarter of a second later, I'm like, they're not here. And all
Mm-hmm.
that pain just, you had that one moment of forgetting, and
Mm-hmm.
then that all the pain rushes in.
But that moment you said, "Oh, Carrie would love that." She was telling you that. That
Yeah.
was coming from her. She
Yeah.
was like, "Oh, mommy, I like that." The thing is that, like, what you were saying, like when you, especially after, as they say, hindsight is always 2020. Afterwards, those moments come back to you that your soul, my soul,
Mhm.
was preparing us
Yeah.
for their soul plan and our soul plan. It was a soul agreement. Your children,
100%.
yes, your children, you saying, we want you to be our mom, but we're not going to be hanging out in that realm as long as you. And you agreed to it. The same thing with me.
For
Yes,
sure, for
yes.
sure. And
Mm,
that understanding came online slowly but surely.
Really, yes.
I had this experience where I saw that costume and thought she would love that. And then
Right,
all that shame came in. And
right.
in my head, I said, why did this have to happen? And
Mm,
that voice came in and said, it, they're right where they're supposed to be. And then my mind said, I'm having a conversation. And in my mind, I said, but why did it have to happen this way?
mhm,
And the voice came in and said, how would you have liked it to happen?
mhm. Because it was going to happen. And yes,
Right.
yes, it could have happened many different ways, but it was a soul plan and a soul agreement.
Yes.
It's going to happen. So, okay, you didn't like it that way. Well, then how would you have liked it to happen?
Yeah.
So it's a, so when we wake up, there's no good
no
answer
good
to that
answer to that
question.
question. Yeah.
No, none at all. No good answer to that question. And when you know, like breathing, which you and I both know, that our children are not gone, they're very much with us, especially now. There four of them are with us right now in this conversation. My son Kyle is always on my left. My daughter Nakia is always on my right, and they're always with me when I'm recording a show. And I talk to them all day long. I literally have physical evidence of my son. I have his voice on tape. I don't know if have you ever heard of Suzanne Giesman?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
She's a friend, and she
Okay.
has gifted me. She gifted me a reading on Kyle's birthday 2 years after his passing. And
Wow.
the weird thing is, I had her as a guest on my show. Okay. And I had never, I mean, another guest had recommended her. So I was like, oh, you got to have Suzanne on your show. So I had her as a guest on my show. I knew the moment my son transitioned that I wanted to have a reading with a medium, but I was not going to look for one. That I said that internally the moment he transitioned. And 2 years or a year or a half after his passing, I launched my podcast 6 months after his passing. That was the
Which is remarkable.
inspiration. Yes, that
Yeah.
was the inspiration for my podcast was my son's passing. And so, but I knew, and as soon as I did a show with Suzanne, I said to myself that she had a waiting list of 18 months at that time. And I said, Suzanne, put me at the end. Yeah, put me at the end, put me on that list. I have to have a reading with you. So, okay, that was in May of that year, May of 2016. Then my son's birthday, it fell on Thanksgiving Day that year. My son, every few years, 4 or 5 years or so, my son's his birthday is November 24th. So his birthday falls right on Thanksgiving Day. So that year, his birthday fell on Thanksgiving. And the week before Thanksgiving, which is my favorite holiday, always has been, I emailed Suzanne and I said, Suzanne, I'm thinking a lot about Kyle. His birthday is next week. Now, Suzanne gets a ton of emails. Okay.
Right.
Within less than 5 minutes, she emails me right back. I'm giving you reading on his birthday on that day. I said, but Suzanne, that's Thanksgiving Day. I don't want to pull you away from your family on Thanksgiving. She said, she also channels Sanaya.
Sanaya, uh-huh.
Sanaya had already told her before she got my email that she was giving a mom a reading on Thanksgiving Day. She didn't know who. When she
Wow.
got my email, she knew it was me.
Wow.
And this is the first time I've never heard of EVP, electronic voice phenomena. I never heard of it, was clueless. She, of course, as a medium, has heard of it, but she never was trying to do it. That reading on my son's birthday in 2016 on Thanksgiving Day, the whole time he was making this noise, this whooshing noise through her computer. We were doing it through Zoom. I'm recording it through Zoom, on Zoom, and she's recording it with a really high quality microphone. Remember, we were just talking about quality microphones before we started
Yeah, we were.
recording, but she was using a high quality microphone to record it, just the audio. I was recording the audio and video in Zoom. And she's like, don't you hear that? Live? I could not hear a thing. And she says, you're going to hear it in the recording. It was loud as day. As soon as she invited Kyle in, you heard this huge whoosh. And
Mm-hmm.
all through that, it was like a 45-minute read. All through it, you would hear the swooshing. And in one spot, and she didn't even hear it. Days later, I had to say, Suzanne, listen, right here in that tape, you could hear Kyle's voice. He
Mm-hmm.
was saying, doing it is what you can hear him say from spirit. Because she was saying what he was saying, which was, Ma, you're here for a purpose. and you're doing it. And what
Mm,
you can hear on that tape is him saying, doing it. And she didn't even hear that live. And
yeah.
I had to tell her, Susan, listen. And when she's like, oh, oh my God. She called Ty, her husband, Ty, come over, listen to this. It was, since then, because I see Suzanne a lot at conferences as well.
Hmm.
He said it has happened several times since then, but the very first time that had ever happened was with the reading of on my son's birthday. And
Wow.
I have images. I don't know if you know of Sonia Rinaldi, another guest on my show. She's a Brazilian researcher. She researched her whole, she's been doing this for over 30 years, trying to communicate with electronic devices. She has images of my son at all different ages when he was
Mm.
adolescent, teenager. I mean, he was 29 when he transitioned, but she has images. I have a 13-minute video on YouTube anybody can see. I'll put it in the show notes. I have physical evidence that my son is very much with me. I don't have
Hmm.
that physical evidence from my daughter who transitioned in 2022, but I did have a reading with Suzanne at a conference, and my daughter, they're so happy. Both of them are so. My
Yes.
son
Yes.
is doing what he loves to do. He's actually, his job on the other side is he's helping young men that transition in his age, like in their
Hmm.
20s and
Hmm.
30s. He's helping them to acclimate to, I would say the astral plane is the
Oh,
best way
yes.
I can
Yeah.
say that.
Yeah.
And my daughter, she was riding horses. She used to ride horses when she was a child. And she was like, she was thanking me for introducing her to horseback riding when she was younger. And they're both happy. They're
Absolutely.
happy and they're not gone. And it
Yeah.
was a soul plan. So they're happy, I'm
Absolutely.
happy. And you and I, we're here, we're still here, but we have work to do and we're doing that work we came here to do.
You know, it's so fascinating that you say that because even the night of the accident, I remember being in the hospital. And of course, my system is still very much in shock for quite a while. But I again had this like knowing drop in that my kids were okay, they were happy, like acknowledging that spirit presence, that knowing that came in was acknowledging that no, we're not okay. We have stuff we've got to move through, but
Right.
they are okay. Like I just
Yes.
felt that and sensed that. And then I had these so then there were times when I would be, especially, okay, so let me back up a little bit because in 2010 I had this remarkable healing experience. I went through 3 years, like almost to the day, of processing and uh trying to figure things out and all the human stuff that we have to do around passing and around like like bringing our brain into some kind of coherence and all of that.
Right.
And I'd been working at trying to figure out how to put one foot in front of the other, and I was making progress. I was healing from my PTSD and I was making some progress, but I was also in many ways still very much in the
Right.
muck of the grief. Like it was so tangible, like it was like darkness was within me.
Yes.
It felt tangible.
Hmm.
And at the 3 year mark, I had this experience, and there was a couple of things that happened, and one was that I ended up at Stonehenge of all the
Okay.
odd things. My
Okay.
husband had a work trip,
Hmm.
and at the last minute, he decided to bring me with him.
Hmm.
And we ended up at Stonehenge that week in between his work stuff.
Right.
And it was years later that I found out I began to understand the powerful um, portal exchange. Sometimes people call Stonehenge in that area the heart chakra of the earth.
Mm.
There's just like a lot of energy around that, like you would,
Yes.
find in Sedona or some of these other
Mm-hmm.
places. And then about a week later, we were back home and I was given a special prayer by someone at church. And within 24 hours of that, like the darkness had lifted. I felt like I went from being asleep before the accident to dying, like,
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
when they passed, to
Mm-hmm.
being alive, like I'd never been alive before.
Yes.
And it was remarkable. But then within a couple of years of that, I began to receive messages that there's a reason I'm still here.
Yeah.
There's work for me to do.
Yeah.
And I would literally, you can probably, I'm sure you can appreciate this. I can remember laying in my bed. Like I remember being it was like in my
Mm-hmm.
room, I'm in my bed and I'm getting these messages that I'm supposed to be sharing my story. And I thought, nobody wants to hear my story. And then it was not as clear as a conversation. I've had these spirit conversations.
Mm-hmm.
I've
Mm-hmm.
had a lot of them since then, but
Right. Right.
I had some of these conversations, but it was a little different. It was just kind of dropping in like this knowing that, and I was basically like, no, no one wants to hear my story. There's nothing like it. The thing that I would always say when that would drop in is there's nothing special about my story. I don't need to, and I don't think that there's anything special about my story, but I do feel like this was part of the plan.
Right.
And it's taken, and maybe you can appreciate this too. It's like it takes time for us to integrate what's happened. Like I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't have told you early on that those experiences before my kids passed was actually my soul,
Plan.
speaking to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was a few years later that I realized there was missing time in the accident.
Mm.
And then as I started to connect to that missing time,
Mm-hmm.
where when I started to recognize that it wasn't just that we rolled and I lost my eyesight, I had lost my consciousness.
Right.
And when I started to connect to that energy, I started to have these remembrances, and they're very faint. They're
Mm-hmm.
not,
Right.
these remembrances of actually rising above the accident with the kids and like
Mm-hmm.
acknowledging that this was our plan. Then there's not a conversation that I can point to and say, this is what we said and this is how, but just this like
More of a knowing.
knowing,
Yeah.
yeah,
A
that
knowing.
and I'd had so many experiences like that where I was just like, I would wake up again. This was, a year or two after this awakening that I had in 2010, and I
Mm-hmm.
would wake up with this like, you're supposed to do something with this. You're supposed to
Mm-hmm.
do something with this. And at the end of 2012, I was introduced to somebody, and we were at a lunch,
Mm-hmm.
and this gentleman was sharing his story where he had gone through some challenging things, and then he was helping people through the challenges that he had been through. And at this lunch, my mom turned to me and said, Julie, share your story. And I was like, I can't share my story. Like,
Mm.
ugh. But I did, like very briefly. I just shared, kind of what happened and kind of some of the miracles around what had
Right.
happened and so forth. And then as we were leaving the restaurant, this gentleman stopped me. He put his hand on my arm and he said, you're supposed to do something with this.
Yes.
And it was like lightning.
Mm-hmm.
It was like God was standing in front of me saying, you're supposed to do something with this. It was like my whole soul vibrated with this energy of, I'm supposed to do something with this.
Yes.
But then it took me some time after that to kind of like, and
Yeah.
I think this, and I will just say, if you're listening to this and you felt like you have a calling or you have something that you're being called forward to do,
Yes.
it's okay that it takes some time.
It is because time is unreal anyway. All there is
Yeah.
the eternal now. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, time is an illusion. Time is
There,
not real. So
there's no reason to feel pressured. There's no reason to
mhm,
feel like I've got to figure this out right now.
mhm,
Things will start to develop as they're to develop, and just follow the breadcrumbs of your heart.
yes.
And in that process, I mean, I look back on some of the steps that I took
Mm-hmm.
between that message and that like understanding, where I'd been kind of pushing it off
Right.
and saying, I can't share my story. There's nothing, like all of that I'd been doing. Once
Right.
that man said that, it kind of cleared that
Right.
from
Clear the
me.
path. Right. Yes.
And then I was like, but what is it? And so then,
Mm-hmm.
I was in this questioning period and to look back and see the different things that kind of fell into place that came across my awareness that it's just truly remarkable.
It
And
is.
then and to where I am now, because I started as a grief specialist and a grief
Mm-hmm.
coach, and
Right.
I developed a whole program around that, and I was teaching other
Mm-hmm.
coaches how to coach people through grief and
Mm-hmm.
sharing my model of healing that I had developed and all of this, but then all this communication with the other side was coming through.
Right.
And I wasn't quite sure what to do with that. And I'd be working with people who had lost a father or a wife or a child and and I would feel
Mm-hmm.
their loved ones in the room with me,
Right.
and their loved ones were communicating with me
Yes.
and telling me how to coach their loved one. But I
Oh,
wasn't telling that to my client. I
I
wasn't
got you.
saying, by the way, your dad's in the room and he's saying XYZ.
Right.
I was just taking that information
And using it to
and
help
using
them.
it, and it was
Right.
remarkable.
Right.
But over time, I began to realize that there was more to my journey,
Mm-hmm.
and I needed to learn more about this because more and more of that communication was coming through.
Yes. Yes.
And as I began to study mediumship,
Mm-hmm.
not with the idea of becoming a medium,
Right. I understand.
I
That's
did not start that way at all.
right.
I was
Right.
just like, I need to understand, so that I'm not misinterpreting messages or things like that. But after 3 years of studying mediumship and feeling
Mhm.
so drawn to it and feeling like I just couldn't deny anymore
Right.
that this was part of my journey.
That was, yes.
Yeah. And so
Yes.
that's when I f- got the courage to say, I'm
Mhm.
a medium, this is what I do. And it is remarkable. It is
Awesome.
amazing, amazing work. Every day I'm just in awe at
Yeah.
these beautiful people that I get to work with, not only on camera, but their
Right.
loved ones on the other side.
Right. Right.
I mean, I just did a reading, my last reading that I just did.
Mm-hmm.
This woman had lost her mom and her sister and the really challenging circumstances
Right.
and all this information that came through, but like there was so much healing because all the things that she had hoped for her mom and her sister that she never saw
Mm-hmm.
happen in life,
Right. Was happened
it
on the
was
other side.
happening on the other side, and they were coming through with these beautiful messages of how they showed up in life,
Mm-hmm.
but how they see things now,
Right.
and bringing so much love and comfort to her. I mean, you just can't explain how beautiful it is. It
Yeah, I
really
know.
just is remarkable.
I'm right there with you. There's like, Um, the wonderful thing, we could let our audience know because you'll be sharing this and I'll be sharing it, and then I'll be a guest on her show, so we're gonna trade hats in a little bit so you guys can see both. But the book behind me, We Touched Heaven, I have a chapter in that book because my son, really, he was supposed to pass 2.5 years before he actually passed.
Mm,
The miracle was doctors told me your son is not going to make it. This was December of 2011. The title of my chapter is Miracle on 34th Street, which is one of my favorite Christmas movies. But we're talking December, we're talking Christmas time, and we're talking at a hospital in Philadelphia on 34th Street. Okay.
wow.
Doctors had said, they asked me, he had been on life support. My son had been on life support for several weeks. Then the doctors had given up hope. They came to me and asked me, could they take him off life support? I said, no. Now I'm telling the doctors, no, I'm not giving permission for them to take my son off life support. But in my mind is I am checking out of here. I was spiritually awake at that time because my awakening was in '07.
Mm,
But I was like, I know I'm creating this. Nobody's doing this to me. This is where I get off the train. I went up to this little quiet, because I was living in the hospital, living in his ICU room for weeks. So I knew, and I exercise to get exercise. I run up and down the stairs and just explore the hospital. So I knew there was this quiet little waiting room that nobody was ever in. So, and I had my laptop, so I sometimes go up into that quiet waiting room with my laptop. Anyway, when doctors asked me that, I said, no, I will not give permission for you to take my son off life support. But I knew I'm going to that waiting room and I'm checking out of here. I said, my son needs a new heart. Give him my heart. I wrote a suicide note. I am not burying my son. My son needs a new heart. Give him my heart. Um, I'm out of here, basically. And the only thing I could get, the strongest thing I could get is a bottle of over-the-counter sleeping pills from the pharmacy that the hospital had. I didn't have a prescription for anything stronger, but I took the whole bottle of sleeping pills and basically they had me on 24-hour suicide watch for a week. A week after that, they allowed me to visit with him for about an hour, supervised visit, meaning there had to be a nurse his aide with me 24/7. Even if it was a male, and in my room they had me in, I went to the bathroom, I took a shower, the bathroom door had to be open, even if the attendant was a male. But anyway,
hmm
so the last supervised visit I had with him, I leaned over to Kyle. He's still on life support because I never gave permission. Now that I'm quote unquote not able to give permission, it went to my daughter that as far as next of kin, went to my
Okay.
daughter. My daughter did not give permission to take him off life support. So I leaned over and I said, Kyle, please get better so we could both go home. That
hmm
night, Kyle pulled himself off life support. Now his vital signs were so perfect. He pulled out the tube, the ventilator, he pulled out the feeding tube, and he semi-sedated because to have a patient on life support, they have to be semi-sedated. Even in his semi-sedated state, he was able to yank it out and his vital signs were perfect, like he was never even sick. It was a true medical miracle. And
mm
a week later, he and we both went home. And when I
mm
got him home from that 2000 December, we came home just before New Year's, December 30th. We came home the day before New Year's Eve. I promised God, I said, God, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know if he's going to pass away tomorrow. I don't know. I will never stop thanking you for letting me bring him home this day. And
mm
I have never broken that promise. So when he did get ill again, like I said, 2.5 years later, and he passed in July of 2014.
hmm
When he passed, I was at complete peace. I
mm
knew it was his soul's time. I knew he was not going anywhere. I knew it was a soul agreement we had. I was at complete peace when he actually passed.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow. And that's why
Yeah.
you have this beautiful, close relationship with him
Yes.
here, with
Hmm.
him, in a different state,
Hmm.
outside of the physical state,
Right.
is because of your understanding, your knowing, your awareness.
Yes.
Yeah, that consciousness is that's so awake and aware,
Yes.
and that's beautiful.
And that's why
Yeah,
it's so important. You share your story, I share my story, because these stories will help those that are struggling, you know.
yeah,
So yes, it's so important we share.
one of the things that happened was obviously this accident happened on a Mother's Day. It was actually the day after my birthday. My birthday was the day before the accident.
Uh,
We had had such a busy day before the accident happened. I mean, there was so much going on. My daughter had her prom that
mm,
night. It was 2 weeks from her graduation from high school. There was just a ton going on. And so we were so busy the day before, we had decided we'd celebrate my birthday when I got back from the trip.
mm-hmm,
And obviously that never happened. But
mm-hmm,
a year later,
mm,
on the anniversary of the accident,
right.
both of my daughters by this time were out at college and they were living away from home, and they surprised us by coming home that weekend.
Mm-hmm,
So I had gone from a very busy house with 6 kids. I was
mm-hmm.
homeschooling too, which I didn't mention previously, but I was
I
also
love the fact that
homeschooling
you
my
were
children.
homeschooled. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, we'd gone from this very, very busy household with 6 kids and all of this to just my husband and I and our 2 teenage boys
Mm-hmm,
at this point. And so when our daughters surprised us and came home for that weekend, the anniversary,
right.
we were sitting in church
Mm-hmm,
that Mother's Day,
mm-hmm,
and I was sitting on that bench, and very much still in deep grief,
right, right,
obviously.
right,
But I
right.
was sitting on that bench, and I felt Carrie and David with us.
Mm-hmm,
And I obviously the presence of my, children who are still here
right.
on the bench with me, with my husband.
Mm-hmm.
And it just like it felt so unified and it felt so beautiful. And I felt a gratitude for being a mother that
Put into words.
I can't even explain. It was a gift given to me
Right.
from spirit. It was a higher frequency than what I was able to hold, and that during that time of grief,
Mm-hmm,
but it completely changed my feelings about the anniversary, about Mother's Day, because so often these anniversaries of
mm-hmm,
someone's passing become these just really dark days of like you remembering their passing and so forth. But in that moment,
mm-hmm,
Mother's Day was transformed for me. And all I feel on Mother's Day now is just tremendous gratitude for being a mother. And I
mm-hmm,
had this understanding, in that moment and then moving forward that I had a choice. I'd
mm-hmm.
had a choice before I came here
Right.
that I could be their mother for 8 and 10 years and
Mm-hmm.
take on that assignment
Yes.
of being their mom for 8 and 10 years
Yes.
and their and fulfilling their mission as
Yes.
well, to
Yes.
have their story told, to
Mm-hmm.
have that experience shared
Yes.
is part of their mission as well. They're
Yes.
one of the reasons I'm here.
Exactly.
That's the main reason I'm here.
Exactly.
And or I could have turned it down. Our whole family could have turned it down, right?
Right, right,
And
right.
and
We
they would have gone to somebody else. And
right.
so in my mind, this is the way that I always look at it.
Mm-hmm.
I would choose every day of my life to have been their mom in physical form. I'm always their mom, but
Right.
in physical form, I would choose all day long to be their mom in physical form for 8 and 10 years versus not to have had that experience.
Exactly.
That was the choice.
Right.
The choice isn't, often when somebody dies in what we call before their
Before.
time,
Right.
often when somebody passes in a sense that we feel like it was before the age that they should have, should however we want to say that, right?
Right.
But we often feel gypped or we feel cheated, like we were cheated out of those years. But
Mm-hmm.
those years were never to have happened.
Exactly.
They were not part of the plan.
Exactly.
So how, when we start to hold that, we
Right.
see that we weren't cheated out of anything.
Not a thing.
We experienced the whole of their lifetime,
Yes. Yes.
and it was whole.
Right.
It was complete.
It was
And when we start to see a baby who was stillborn or a
Mm-hmm.
child who unexpectedly passes as a toddler,
Mm-hmm.
and we start to see, oh, we experienced their whole lifetime. We experienced
Mm-hmm.
their this was the entirety
Mm-hmm.
of what this life, what time was for them
Them. Yes.
and for us.
Right. And it was a soul agreement. We do, as moms,
Absolutely.
we agreed to that before we were born. We agreed to that. And so when we understand that and understand that there is no such thing as death, all there is eternal life. These bodies are just a space suit. It's no
Yeah.
different than, okay, what dress am I going to wear today?
It's
It's
our
no
vehicle.
dress. It's just a vehicle to get around in this realm. That's all it is. It is
Yeah.
not us. We are
Yeah.
sovereign, divine beings of light, and we will always exist. And our children that are in spirit are always with us, and they want us. Anyone breathing oxygen, I say, if you're here for a reason. You're here for a purpose. And people will ask me all the time, well, what's my purpose? I'm like, I can't tell you that. That's inside of you. You
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
tap into, like you were saying, follow where your heart is leading you. It's going to come from your heart and soul. It's not going to come from here. Okay.
Yeah. For
Follow
sure.
where your heart and soul is leading you because that is exactly why you came.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is it okay if I share one
Of
other
course.
story that I had
Of
when,
course. Of course. Of
speaking
course.
to this idea
Yes.
of it
Yes.
being a soul plan?
Mm-hmm.
It was a couple of years after they had passed, and I remember, being in my house and, being there with my two teenage sons and feeling like I just remember having this deep sadness that my boys were growing up in a different household than my girls did.
Mm-hmm.
My girls were off at college. They had gone through all of their childhood
Mm-hmm.
with a mom that was present and, in
Mm-hmm.
whatever capacity I had, right?
Right. Right.
But my boys were living in a totally different household
Mm-hmm.
because I was, emotionally checked out with grief, and I was not as functional, not as aware, not as connected, and all of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was feeling this deep sadness about that. And I heard in my head, I mean, actually in my head, I was saying, this is not fair. This is
Mm.
not fair to them.
Mm.
And that's when I heard this again, this quiet voice of spirit that said, they agreed to this too.
Yes. Yes.
And it was an idea that I had not considered.
Right.
But that voice, the spirit came in and said they agreed to this too.
Mm-hmm.
And that this is part of their soul plan too.
Two. Yes.
And that changed again, like all, these little moments when spirit was able to tap in beyond that, fog of grief that I was in.
Right.
When spirit was able to tap in and give me these insights, it was just so enlightening.
Yeah.
And all of these little pieces just began to come together into a bigger picture of what's really happening here.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So true. That is so true. I always say everything that happens in perfect divine timing, perfect divine order. It is anything that happens. We are creating this
Yes.
reality. Nothing outside of us, whether you call it God, Jehovah, whatever name you have for all that is, because that's my terminology for source energy. All there is, that's all there is we are. I love, my favorite quote is Rumi: you're not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in the drop. Each one of us is all of God in a drop, and each one of us is creating our reality here. It is a dream of our creation. That is my book that I'm working on, which is Life's Challenges Are Blessings in Disguise. And I'm thinking the subtitle will be Own Your Creation.
Mm.
because this everything that happens to each one of us, we are creating. It's not happening outside of us. It's not a God up in the sky saying, okay, I'm going to punish you. None of that. We are gods, each one of us. And
Yeah.
we are God, and the only creation we can control is our life experience, which is our dream of our own creation. And everything happens by soul agreement.
Yeah,
So,
and that realization has
yes,
been such a beautiful thing for me in my life. And
yes,
when challenges come along,
yes.
I start to look at it and I think, wait a second, I am I am God. I am part of God. I wouldn't say, it's like I can I can choose. I can
Mhm,
choose, and it's like taking the edge off of
mhm.
everything. It's not that I don't still have human
Of
responses and human
course.
reactions. I think we're meant to. That's
Yeah,
why we're here. That's the
we wouldn't
experience.
still be here if we didn't have, we wouldn't have the spacesuit. We would have let go of the spacesuit and returned to spirit if we
Yeah.
didn't have.
Yeah.
So yes, our humanness, it is it's important, but it's like I always say, I put my mind, my monkey mind, in the passenger seat. Sometimes I tell it to get in the back seat because my heart and soul is going to always be in the driver's seat of
Yeah.
my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but sometimes I have to tell my monkey mind, get in the back seat. I don't want to hear monkey mind. I want to follow, but we do, our mind and our humanness is here, and our ego is here to protect this spacesuit. That is
Yeah.
what it's there for.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's like, Spirit brought to me a few months ago my guides, the
Mm-hmm.
angels that I channel. And so, they brought to me this practice of calm, clear, connect.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, we can have our human reaction,
Right.
but then when we can take that pause
Right.
and we can breathe deeply. We can bring our attention to our heart. We can calm and we can clear our energy field and we connect to all that
Mm-hmm.
is. We
Yeah.
ground through our feet. We
Mm-hmm.
connect to the divine, not
Yeah.
only from our crown, but
Right.
from our heart,
Heart. Yeah.
because our heart is connected to our higher self. It's connected to our soul, and
Exactly.
it's always connected. It's just
Always.
whether it's just
Yeah.
where is our awareness and where is our intention and our attention.
Exactly. I mean, it happens to all of us. Something will happen, and you get, for a moment, you get triggered. Now I'm getting much better at those moments when I get triggered. Then I do exactly what you say. I stop. I take a few deep breaths, as many deep breaths as I need before I respond. See, because I want to respond from a place of love and light and not react from
Yeah,
a place of anger, you
yeah,
know? So I want to respond from a higher frequency. So sometimes I'm like, wait, okay, let me breathe. Yeah, I'll say it and remind myself to breathe and respond with love and light. And
yeah,
that changes the outcome of the situation. Because if we
for sure.
react to it from a low frequency, we're just going to bring on more low frequency experience. If we respond with love and light, we're changing the entire outcome
Yeah,
of that.
for
Yes.
sure. For sure.
Well, this has been, now please share your podcast, your website, all your information, which I will have actually edited into the bottom of this video and links in the description. So
Awesome.
share how
Yeah.
people can get in touch with you.
Yeah, so the best place to get a hold of me is just my name, juliecluff.com, CLUFF
Mhm.
dot com. And there you can find, I have a angel guide that talks about, our connections with the angels. I have angel affirmations there. I have my offerings there, my services as a medium and as a spiritual guide. on that website. You can also follow me on social media. I mostly show up on YouTube,
Mm-hmm.
Instagram, and Facebook. And
Okay.
it's my name, Julie Cluff. On
Mm-hmm.
Instagram, it's Julie Cluff Coaching. On YouTube, it's Julie Cluff Coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just come hang out and join along and watch the interview with Caroline that I'm getting ready to do in a few minutes.
Yes. Yes. Watch both. I'm going to encourage people. You got to watch both. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that'll I
Yes.
think it's an
Yes.
amazing
Yes.
thing. And we're
So,
recording these one right after the other,
the
so it's
other.
really super fun.
Yeah. So if he's like, oh, she didn't change her clothes. I could change church, but I'm not going to.
I'm not going to there, so
Yeah.
there's that.
Yeah. And also, I just want to remind both audiences, your audiences and my audiences, that we are living in such amazing times right now. We truly are. We are in the midst of humanity's great consciousness awakening. And I got that download from my higher self in March of 2020. 6 years ago. It's kind
Mhm.
of, I believe, 6 years have gone by, but I got that download clear as day
Yeah.
that right at the beginning of the what I call the plandemic, scamdemic, shamdemic. This is what I call it. Okay. Right at that beginning of that, my higher self said, humanity's great awakening has begun. And what happened in 2020 had to happen for
Hmm.
us to get to where we are. But we right now, we are living, because spiritually, we are living in a 1 year. Chinese astrology calls it the fire horse year,
Right.
but it's a 1 year, and it's truly the beginning of a new dawn. And I hope I'm saying that right sometimes. The new beginning for humanity's consciousness, but it is a soul choice
Yeah.
because it's all frequency. And there's no judgment. Whatever vibration a soul chooses in that now moment, there's no judgment. But those that are ready to go to a higher level are going to keep their frequency high. And we are all going to 5D New Earth. Those that choose to stay with 3D Matrix Earth, it's no judgment. They just want more. It's like, okay, it's kind of like, okay, if you go to a movie theater, right? And there's like 20 movies to choose from. And you're with your friend. He's like, oh, I want to see that nice movie about horses and, you know, like like a Little House on the Prairie type movie. Because I grew up loving Brady Bunch and Little
Little
House
House.
on the Prairie. So, okay. Oh, I want to go see that, a movie with rainbows and love and light. And they're like, oh no, I want to go see that monster movie. I was like, okay, you go do you. You go do
Yeah.
you. And then we'll meet back here, okay, afterwards.
Right.
The movie. That's all it is. It's like it's just whatever movie they choose to experience, and there's no judgment.
Yeah,
There's no judgment.
for
But
sure.
we are living in amazing times. Thank you so, so, so much.
Thank
And
you.
we will see each other in a few minutes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Bye bye for now.
Bye.